Okay, hi everyone. Um, I'm Sharon Yamato. I'm one of the presenters today. It's a real honor to be here. One of the last programs in this incredible week-long series, Tadaima 2025. I definitely want to thank Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimage's director, Kimiko Mar, and Caroline Kimura for all of their work putting this week of programs together and allowing us to be a part of it. So I'll start with some introductions. Starting with myself. I'm a Sansei writer and filmmaker who has devoted the last, believe it or not, 20 years to uncovering stories about the World War II incarceration. It's kind of a big focus of mine. And I'm happy to say that I've now done 5 films on the subject and written 2 books, one of which I collaborated on with one of the other presenters today, Stan Honda, called Moving Walls. So I'm on this wonderful creative team that put together this brand new website called forestassemblycenters.com. And what we tried to do was offer a past and present view of the 15 assembly centers and 1 reception center that sprouted up almost immediately after the issuance of EO 9066. So with that, I'd like to introduce the other members of our team. First off, I can say honestly that Stan Honda is one of the best photographers I know. I was fortunate to meet him when we were working way back in 1993 in, of all places, Powell, Wyoming. Stan had come from New York and I from Los Angeles to help move 2 barrack segments from Heart Mountain to the Japanese American National Museum for their permanent exhibition. So we ended up collaborating on this book called Moving Walls, The Barracks of America's Concentration Camps. At the time, Stan was a photojournalist for Newsday in New York. And since then, he spent over a decade working at Agence France Presse, um, which he has since retired from, but he now has combined his interest in photography and, well, I should say, interest in astronomy and skill in photography to become a master of night sky landscapes. So on to our next presenter, Brian Nia. He is someone I've known for way too long. Uh, you could say that he is, well, I want to mention he's also known as the spoiled sensei. He has an encyclopedic knowledge of Japanese American history, having served as the editor of the actual print version of the encyclopedia and now online for Densho. And if you ask any researcher or scholar, they'll tell you that the Densho Encyclopedia is just an invaluable resource, um, covering every conceivable subject on the World War II incarceration and before and after Japanese American history. So Brian serves now as a content director at Densho and has held various other positions at JANM, at the UCLA Asian American Studies program, and the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii. So it's a real great thing to have us all. I'm really excited to start off this program because I think it's going to be very informative. I hope it's going to be very informative. So I get the job of introducing our website. And I think Stan is going to put up our homepage so that you can see basically what we're talking about. Um, just by way of introduction, Stan and I actually began our quest to visit all 16 sites back in February of 2023. We actually spent on and off during the year, going up and down California, then on to Portland and Seattle, and Stan went to Arizona. I stayed home. And what we wanted to do was document what was happening at each of the assembly sites, and also talk to some of the people who were either at the site during the war or involved in memorializing them today. So we wanted to try to show what was happening at each and every one of these sites in an effort to show how important they were to our history.
Mhm.
So we can blame Brian, who was the one who actually kind of coerced us into doing this because he recognized how important they were, and also that no one had done a real one place to find all of them in one place, and that they had been somewhat overlooked. So he was really involved from the very beginning. Um, so I'm going to begin by asking him the question of why is it that these assembly centers, what makes them so important? Are you there, Brian?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Sharon, for the nice introduction. And I don't know if coerced is the right word. Suggested maybe, but no, yeah, I'm really glad that you put the site together, much needed. So what I'm going to do briefly is just give a quick overview of the story of the so-called Assembly Center, and then I'll also talk about the terminology a little bit at the end. But as the slide or the opening to the website indicates, they were short-term detention centers built by the Wartime Civil Control Agency, WCCA, which was formed in March 11th, 1942, and it was actually formed by the Western Defense Command, which is the Army basically. So this is an Army-run program. The head of the WCCA was the infamous Carl Bendetson, who was viewed by many historians as a prime architect of the whole exclusion and incarceration process. Um, and I just want to read briefly from the actual order creating the WCCA. And the Western Defense Command said it was the agency's duty was to implement the mass force removal of Japanese Americans, quote, with a minimum of economic and social dislocation, a minimum use of military personnel, and maximum speed, and initially to employ all appropriate means to encourage voluntary migration, end quote. The voluntary migration thing is a key because I think the hope was that most Japanese Americans would move on their own. But by the middle of March, it was clear that that wasn't going to happen for a lot of reasons. And as such, the WCCA, the first thing they did was to start quickly building these short-term detention facilities that would be called assembly centers. As Sharon mentioned, there are 15 of them, 12 in California, one each in Arizona, um, Washington, and Oregon. Um, they mostly were built near where the Japanese Americans would be excluded from, although there are exceptions. I have to qualify everything because there are exceptions to everything. And they mostly used existing facilities such as fairgrounds and racetracks. Um, there were also two what they called reception centers, only one of which was run by the WCCA, the Owens Valley Reception Center. There was a second one not run by the WCCA and thus not a part of this website, the Colorado River Reception Center. Both of those were built further away and were newly built facilities, and both of them became WRA concentration camps. The former became Manzanar, the latter became Poston. Um, and then there were also two sites the WCCA built but did not use. There were planned assembly centers in Cave Creek, Arizona, and Toppenish in central Washington that were basically completed but were not used for various reasons. The upshot of all of this, I think, is that um, after the decision was made to remove all Japanese Americans from the West Coast, there really wasn't any thought about, okay, now what? How are you actually going to pull this off? So the various government agencies, the WCCA, the Western Defense Command, the newly formed War Relocation Authority, were just scrambling to try to figure out how are we going to do this? And you really get a sense that in February, March, April, they're just flying by the seat of their pants trying to figure out how we're going to do this. So that's why you see these various false starts that go on. Should also mention that while most Japanese Americans went to the so-called assembly centers prior to going to the War Relocation Authority concentration camps, significant portion of them did not. In addition to those who went directly to Manzanar and Poston, there were significant numbers who went to Tule Lake and Gila River directly, and thus did not experience, the assembly center experience of going to one camp and then having to move to a second one. Um, as Sharon mentioned, the assembly centers are viewed largely as a footnote, I think, in the larger incarceration story. Although I think they're important for a number of reasons. One is that much of the incarceration experience that we are familiar with was kind of introduced at the assembly centers. This is where we first were, we Japanese Americans were first kind of introduced to, living in these barracks communally that didn't have plumbing, and that you had to have shared bathroom and laundry and dining facilities that were communal. Where you're introduced to this lack of privacy, the indignity and implied danger of the barbed wire and the guard towers with armed MPs and many other things. I think I can safely say that as run by the Army, things were more regimented, and I think conditions were worse for the most part in the assembly centers than in the WRA camps, so they were bad enough there. Um, Couple of examples of things you see in the assembly centers, but not in the WRA camps, is that you had, at least at the beginning, you had daily roll calls, you had a curfew, you had MPs who were actually, in the camps, enforcing the law within the camps, none of which happened in the WRA camps. Um, you also had the assembly centers were run, the staff of the assembly centers primarily came from the ranks of the WPA, the Work Projects Administration, which I think had something of a moderating effect on conditions there. I think it could have been much worse had it truly been run by the Army. Um, and then I think the other key point that I think that makes this site important is that I think for many of us, even who are pretty familiar with the overall incarceration story, know a fair amount, for instance, about our families, WRA camp story. I think typically we don't know a whole lot about the assembly center side. We know the difference between Manzanar and Heart Mountain and Tule Lake. But typically, we don't know the details of Portland, for instance, which was built in a big livestock pavilion. We don't know we have this understanding, I think, that in some sites, horse stalls were used to house the incarcerated Japanese Americans, but don't necessarily know which ones and how many. That there were some that were open for just a month or less. Others were open for 6 months or more. Fresno, Santa Anita was open even for a little longer than that. Um, and I think the site provides some of the particulars of each of the individual sites. And then I think this comes at a time where there seems to be growing interest in the assembly center story. I think as evidenced by recent site commemoration at a number of places. There's a newish memorial, for instance, at Marysville. There's new kind of fairly elaborate exhibits and memorials at Puyallup and Tanforan. There's a project in the works to build a memorial at the Tulare site, which is the site that doesn't have one. So yeah, I think we're coming at a time when there is more interest, and this site is something that those who want to visit these sites can draw on and get information. And then I just want to end by just a quick note on terminology. We do use the assembly centers, recognizing it's a euphemistic term. We usually, you know, uh, include adjectives to kind of to indicate that. And in part, there really isn't a good alternative. I think some have used temporary detention centers or related terms. The problem with those, though, that term also applies to sites like Sand Island or Tuna Canyon and many, many other sites. So it's difficult to have a term specific to these 15 or 16 or 17, depending on how you count, short-term sites on the way to WRA camps. And we just don't have a shorthand term for that. I've used WCCA camps sometimes, but nobody knows what that is. So for now, we're using assembly centers with the quotes, or forced assembly centers, or so-called assembly centers, or something like that for the time being. So anyway, with that, I will throw it back to Sharon and Stan to actually take a look at the site.
Yeah, I would say that just as a footnote, we we really agonized over the name of our website, and Brian was one of the people to really not want to use just assemblycenters.com, which is the way we usually think of these places, right? As assembly centers, but it really is not a real way of, I mean, it's such a euphemism that we wanted to stay away from it. So we added forced, and hopefully people will understand, or we're thinking so-called assembly centers, but that was kind of a weird title for a website. So anyway, so it was something that we really took under consideration when we put together the site. So with that, Stan has the horrible job of showing you how to navigate our website. It's pretty simple, but I wanted him to give you an idea of what you can find and how you find it. So Stan, it's all yours.
Well, my pleasure, Sharon. It's great to show off our website. And if you want to follow along, you could go to forcedassemblycenters.com and you'll get to our website and you'll see the opening homepage. And what Sharon did was find a lot of really great historical images. So as you scroll down, you see a few of these historical images that she found and some interesting facts, information about each of the sites that we found. And so there's an amazing, I think, archive of these historical photos, and I think they really add to what we're trying to get across. This kind of sets the stage for how each of the sites and how the information that we can give on each of these sites. The locations, you can actually get to each of the information about each of the sites a couple of ways. We've got these thumbnail images and brief descriptions about each of the sites where you could click on any of the photos and get to the sites. There's also a locations menu item at the very top, and that'll give you a whole list of the sites, and you could click on any of those. So I think we used a lot of the historic images for these thumbnails to get you to each of the 16 sites that we have listed. And you kind of get an idea of just how huge this program was and how it affected all of the Japanese Americans on the in or near the West Coast. Near the bottom of the homepage, we've got a section, just essentially a nice slideshow strip of how they look today. And so what we did was just we picked one image of from each of the sites from a current day image. And so you can scroll through these and see current day images from each of these sites and how they look today. So let me go back up to the list of the different sites, and I'll start with Puyallup. And so if you go to each of the site pages, you get a brief description about the site, where it was, what exists now. Puyallup was built on the site of the Western Washington Fairground, just south of Seattle, Washington. So we've got a brief description, and also if you want more detailed description, you can go to densho.org, and you can go there. There's an entire section that I think Brian was instrumental in setting up that tells you much more detailed information about each of the assembly center sites. So that's definitely worth reading as well. We pull up some fast facts about each of the sites, just little bits of information. I think that kind of helps you understand what was going on, how many people were there, what the area was like. Things like there were 37 births, 11 deaths at Puyallup, and some of the notable people that might have been incarcerated there. And then what Sharon will talk in more detail a little bit later is that there's the Erezo book that has the listings of everyone that was incarcerated. And so we were able to get a link that will go to the page of each assembly center site in the original book, and so that you could try to look up relatives, friends that might have been incarcerated at that particular assembly center site. Below the information, we have a big gallery of photos, and it's a mix of current day and historic photos. If you hover over each of them, you can get information about them. And if you click on the picture, you can get a larger slideshow, and you could scroll through those, and you could see the pictures much bigger on your screen. It's amazing to look at a lot of these historic pictures. You sort of see these people that could have been any one of our relatives in any of these assembly centers, and you kind of see a lot of the daily life, what was happening in the assembly centers at the time. At Puyallup, there's a modern day memorial that predates the memorial that was just constructed there. And so that was interesting to find out. And the new memorial has these interactive video screens that I think that we'll see a little bit in a video coming up. So below the still image gallery, we've got a selection of videos, and there are usually, I learned how to fly a drone through these, through the whole project, because we found a lot of, almost every of the assembly center sites had an aerial picture, presumably taken by an Army photographer. And so we wanted to try to kind of give a general idea of what's in the area around the site now. If you went there now, what would it look like? So let me just play you this video.
The Puyallup Assembly Center is seen in this 1942 aerial photograph. Barracks were constructed in 4 areas of the former Western Washington Fairgrounds. The current Remembrance Gallery is located inside the exposition building, where the present-day fairgrounds and Area A and B parking lots are seen. Area C was west of the fair. The geographically separated areas created problems for residents not allowed to move between them.
And we often interviewed people who actually worked on the project or actual survivors of the assembly center. We interviewed a woman named Eileen Lamphere at Puyallup, who was instrumental in getting this remembrance gallery built. And so you can get a little idea of what the gallery looks like there, which just opened, I think, this past year.
Mm-hmm. I am Eileen Yamada Lamphere. Right now, I'm the president of the Puyallup Valley chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League. We are on the site of the 1942 Puyallup Assembly Center. The location of the Remembrance Gallery is on the Washington State Fairgrounds. Back in '42, it was known as the Puyallup Fairgrounds. So we're in Puyallup, Washington. Before you even get into the grandstand area, you will find a cylinder sculpture. It's black, and you might wonder, gee, what is that? And if you walk up closer, you'll see that there are cutouts, figures of men, women, and children, and also hands clasping. And that is a sculpture that was built by George Tsutakawa, and he named it Harmony. There's basically 3 physical elements to the gallery. The main focus is what we call monument, and that is the over 7,500 names. They are permanently etched. They're a little bit raised, so people can touch and kind of get a feel, but if you're so inclined, you can also take a piece of paper and do a pencil etching. There's another area that we call through line, but actually it's the historic center. Lots of interactive maps. So if you did not come here to Puyallup, maybe your family went to Pinedale, you can go up to the map and touch Pinedale, and there'll be a brief caption for you about who came there and what it was like. We have 6 screens. 2 of them will be oral history. There's 37 stories that we will be highlighting. So with technology, you'll be able to hear the stories, but not interrupt other people. We all
The other thing we wanted to do with the website was make it quite useful. Another note is below, oftentimes below the current day videos that we made, Sharon was able to find interviews that appear on Den Show. There's excerpts from these interviews of survivors who were at that particular assembly center, and they talk about their experiences in these other videos. We have a section toward the bottom of each of the site pages called Plan Your Visit. One thing that I know a lot of people who are researching their family background or friends, they want to know where the sites are located. So we put some information about how to actually get to the site itself. So we have information about the State Fair, which is called right now, where the location is, address, phone numbers for hours and information. And we also have a link to a Google Maps so that you can plan your trip. You can see exactly where it is. Where we try to put the map pin where a memorial or a monument is located right now, and you could get a general idea where that is, as well as you put in directions from wherever you're departing from, and you could see where the actual site, where the site is. And so we thought that could make the site useful if you're trying to locate where friends or relatives were. Let me go to another site, Marysville, which is in Northern California. And so that Marysville also had an interesting group that raised money and put together a very striking memorial that had just really interesting cutouts of both the state of California and the United States, plus some historic photos of people who were actually in the center. And so that was quite interesting to us, and it's fairly easy to find. And here's an interview with Sadako Nimura, who talks about her experiences as a small child.
Things happened so fast after the war, and how we had to prepare, and throw things away, and Papa burning his books, and burying things, and yeah, well, we were told that we couldn't take anything with, or keep anything with the Japanese written on it. So, Papa liked to read a lot, and he really respected books, and he had a pretty good historical, sense and everything. So he just started. It was an old house with square nails. It was that old, and there was a fireplace, and I just remember him pitching those things into the fireplace. And then Hamusa, who the man he had picked up, looked at me. He says, "Why can't everybody get along?"
So each of the sites have a little bit about, if there's a memorial there, a little bit of somebody talking about the memorial, and we try to interview a few of the survivors of the actual assembly center. So I hand it back to Brian and Sharon now for more, and we'll talk about a couple more of the sections of the website in a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Stan. I think the thing that was important to me was definitely getting some firsthand impressions from people who were actually at the sites. And every time we could, we tried to get people who were there as children now, obviously, to be there when we were there, to be photographed or videoed. In a couple of cases, one man at Fresno was 102. And was fascinating. He was able to tell stories of having been there. So again, I think those firsthand stories, especially for those of us who weren't in camp, are really important, just to get a glimpse. And then, of course, Densho's website was invaluable in terms of providing oral histories of people who talked about a lot of things, but we managed to include some stuff about the assembly centers in interviews that were done with them. So I kind of wanted next turn to actually, Brian might be able to elucidate us on the largest assembly center at Santa Anita, and give us if Brian, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of capsule summary of what constituted this large detention facility and, some of the more unusual things about it.
Sure. Yeah. No, Santa Anita was gigantic. I mean, it's bigger than, all but I think one of the WRA camps. It's basically LA people, although there were so many LA people went to various assembly centers and various WRA camps, but, most ended up at Santa Anita. It, was and is a horse race track. And I think it's most infamous for the fact that a good percentage of the incarcerees there were held in converted horse stables. Not the majority. It was a little less than half, 40 to 45%. So most were in new barracks, but a very significant minority were in were in these converted horse stables. Similarly, in the Bay Area, Tanforan, also converted racetrack, it was a similar story where a minority, but again, a significant minority, like again, 45% of the population at Tanforan were also in the stables. And I think those stories just, there's something just very poetic's probably the wrong word, but uh, symbolic, about that, about how Japanese Americans were treated as being literally less than human in these situations. Um, People from Santa Anita went to many different camps. Santa Anita was open the longest, so some people were there for upwards of 6 months. Um, and I find it kind of comical that in looking at reports from various WRA concentration camps, in almost every one where Santa Anita people were, the Santa Anita people were considered bad news, the troublemakers, particularly disgruntled. And I don't know if it was an LA thing or the particular situation at Santa Anita. I think it's a little of both that led to to that situation. But yeah, just that's some quick background on Santa Anita, and I think Sharon, you're gonna introduce the story of one notable former incarceree from Santa Anita.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say one of the offshoots of our website, because we originally wanted to find people who were actually there. So along came June O.G. Burke, who's just celebrated her 93rd birthday, and she took us on a tour. And that's when, we realized that this is not something that we want to just limit to 3 minutes on our website, but we wanted to do a whole film about her because it was so fascinating what she remembered. Um, she showed us around. The thing that, of course, stuck in me was that she was able to locate the exact horse stall where her family and she were held. And we were able to see it the way it looks today. So, at any rate, the film we were able to actually, thanks to director Evan Kodani, who's with the Japanese American National Museum, put together a short film, very 16 minutes, that tells June's story. It's kind of I hope you all get to see it because it's actually quite amusing in a lot of ways. It's called The Misadventures of a Nisei Queen, which doesn't sound like it has a lot to do with Santa Anita, but it combines humor and the reality of the camps, hopefully in an entertaining piece. So we're lucky that we get to show a clip from the film. It's only a brief portion of it, but give you an idea of the Santa Anita relationship to the misadventures of a Nisei Queen. So Stan's gonna play it now and get to see a bit of it.
These were barracks all the way around, and then the chain link fence with the guard towers would be all around too, stationed out here. When we first got here, they had us get a pillow and put hay in the pillow, and then we had to drag the pillow all up the road to where we were staying. They were not painted this color. What I remember was just like dirty white, black streaks. And there were families living in each of these stalls. It didn't look as nice as this. And there was no green lawn either. So this is the barn, barn 54. This tree was right in front of our place. Next to the tree was our door. So each horse stall was a separate family. And so it's open on the top, so you can hear all your neighbors talking and babies crying. So this would be my stall, number 37. They probably washed it down, but the smell was still here. I don't think you could get rid of the smell. That's a pretty horse. I guess when you're a child, it looks like a big, huge room, and I was 10 years old. But when I actually see it now, I can't imagine how we fit 3 beds in there. I wish we had left our marking like somebody was here. I wish I had left a marking saying June was here. Now, Seabiscuit lived down one of these places, but I think a lot of people had signs saying Seabiscuit slept here. And every so often you'll see another sign saying, no, Seabiscuit slept here. Some signs would say, shut the door, you think you live in a barn? So every morning we had to walk from here all the way down to the receiving barn to brush our teeth. This side of the room was for women, and the other side was for men. There was a large plywood board going all the way across the room. You want me to take a shower? When I first came here a few weeks ago, ever since then I remember the shower room very much. And then I came here before and I saw where we slept, and memories come back. I guess some things you just want to forget.
So that's just a little brief look at the film. I hope we are able to show it to a lot of you out in this audience, because it's a wonderful film and it's a wonderful story. And June is, I don't know how to describe June. Brian knows her well too, and it's hard not to love her. And she's also in the audience today, so maybe toward the end when we open it up to questions, we can get her to say a few words. June, if you're there, still there. But to finish out, I think we wanted to give you an idea of some of the other pages on the site, so you have some more references to what's available on it. One of the things that I'm kind of proud of is our resource page. One of the things that was kind of problematic, not really problematic, but we didn't want to repeat what Densho has on their site, which is quite expensive. The individual entries on the assembly centers has a lot of bibliography too, which are really important articles related to each site. But there have been more current pieces, resource material that has come up of late. And so I tried to gather up as many documents as I could from newspaper articles, things that have really sprouted up in the last few years. And as Brian mentioned, the assembly centers are getting a little more attention now than they have in the past. So you can scroll down and see click on every single site, and we tried to include various articles pertaining to each one. Uh, it, each one has really some unique things. The only one that was rather problematic was Meyer, because it was only open for, what was it, Brian? 1 month maybe. It was open for a very short period of time, and we couldn't find any former descendants who were there. So that was the one problematic one, but all of the others, but there are articles about it and photographs from it. So we tried to include all of those in the resource page. And I think it's a really important thing to keep this page updated, because as
Mhm.
more and more stories come out about these assembly centers, we'd like to include them on the site. So I encourage any of you who have any information that is not included here. I really would love to hear from you, and um, you can contact us through the resources page, through it's at the very bottom of every page. It's a way that you can register at our site. So if you have any comments, questions, or whatever, I'd really like to encourage all people to stay actively involved in it. We'll let you know what's happening with it, where we'll be doing events, and also hopefully, I mean, for to give you another example, at Stockton, they're building well, there's a huge warehouse there that's not being used. It was actually built by the future farmers of America right before the war, and most of those people were Japanese Americans. And ironically, those are the people that they ended up housing in that same area. It became the hospital of the camp. At any rate, that building is still there. It's an amazing building. And when we were there, we were able to tour it, but they're now a group is now working on trying to preserve it. So we hope to keep you updated on things like that, so that whatever is going on at each of these sites you can get the most current information. So that's really important. The other thing, I think I'm going to return to Brian to talk about the, again, I really want to thank Densho, because Densho really was our factual resource. We really tried to provide more of a pictorial look at each of these sites. But as far as information is concerned, and maybe Brian, you can talk a little bit about Densho's kind of ongoing work on the assembly centers.
Yeah, we're not doing anything specifically on assembly centers. I think there's a general process to update the articles in general. So, we are going to continue to add more resources about each of the sites. And as you know, the National Archives has recently released with no fanfare, like hundreds of thousands of pages of documents related to the assembly centers on their website. So, if you want to do further research on the assembly centers now, there's this incredible cache of information now available at the National Archives online. Before you had to go either to College Park or to San Bruno to look at this material, but now it's all digitized. So it's an incredible resource. And one of these days, perhaps I'll get to going through all of that material if I live long enough, and further updating those articles. But I think we're just really scratching the surface on what we know about them. Yeah, I encourage graduate students and others who are interested in an interesting topic to kind of look at these. And one angle that hasn't been looked at that I think is ripe is the extent to which conflict and politics within the assembly centers further influenced what went on in the camps those people went to. It's very clear that what happens at Puyallup spills into Minidoka, and also very clear that what happens at Sacramento in particular spills into Tule Lake. And I think you see similar kinds of stories if you follow the people from specific assembly centers to work to the WRA camps they ended up in. But anyway, yeah, there's just so much. So we'll see how much we're able to do in the months and years to come.
And by the way, we do have a link to that material that Brian referred to on our site. So if anyone wants to dive in, you can find it on the link on our site. The other thing that I'm really grateful for is the fact that Stan mentioned it. We have a link to Idacho or Idazo, the names project. And they were very, very I mean, it was so helpful that instead of going to they provided a link to each individual assembly center page. So descendants of, say, Santa Anita, if they want to find out, if you know, find the names of people who are at that particular site, you can find it specifically if you click on the location page. At the bottom of each location page, there's a link to the site on Idaso that gives you all the names of people at that particular site. So it doesn't take much searching. Well, obviously it takes a lot of searching once you get to the site to find the names, but at least we have a specific reference to the site, the names of the people who were at that particular site. Now, there are some problems in terms of accuracy of that. And I was hoping Brian could maybe explain that the Assembly Center situation was very difficult in terms of collecting
Yeah.
all the names.
Yeah, there's no easy way to find the names of everyone who was in a particular assembly center. I think, you know, the Irezo folks are trying really hard to do that. And I was just talking to the director of the project, Duncan Duquesne Williams, not long ago, and he's pretty confident they have everyone, though there still may be, you know, one or two people here and there missing. The problem being that whereas the War Relocation Authority, the WRA, kept these very detailed records of who was in each camp, um, there are not similar records for the assembly centers. And there were several hundred people who were in assembly centers who did not go to WRA camps. They either kind of resettled directly out of the assembly centers, whether to go to college or who left for agricultural leave and kind of stayed out. People who died in the assembly centers, people who repatriated. So, and those people don't show up in the WRA records, and it's been a challenge to try to find all of those people. And you know, I think the records in you know the National Archive material I mentioned will go a long way towards filling that hole. But yeah, that part of the story has been difficult. I think, as I said, I think Irezo has all or almost all, but you know, a handful accounted for. But yeah, that's yeah, that part of the story is really has been a challenge.
But thankfully, the names that they have so far are going to be listed on the site, and really, we're really grateful to Duncan Williams and
Yes.
the team for sharing it with us in such an easily available way. So I think we're kind of done. We'd love to, you know, hear from you guys as if you have any questions. There are several ways of asking them. One is to write them in on the chat. I maybe, or you can actually, if you unmute yourself, you can ask a question, and we can see your face if you turn on your video. So I don't see anything yet. So I am going to see if we can get June Burke to come on screen. June, are you able to provide your
Ah,
unmute? I know that it's a little. Oh, there you are. Yay. Great. Okay. So June's with us. I'm so happy you made it. I know she has a busy life for a 93-year-old. You're always doing something. But I kind of wanted to ask you because again, yeah, there are very few survivors of these assembly centers who are as articulate as June is. And she took us on this incredible tour and has done that for many other groups besides, our little crew. So I want to kind of ask you what were your memories, in a nutshell of being at Santa Anita? What did you like, dislike? What was the good and the bad of Santa Anita?
Um, I have a lot of, I think, wonderful memories of Santa Anita. And that is strange to say that they were happy memories, but they were. And I like what Brian said. They should be called forced assembly centers because we didn't go there because we wanted to. We were taken there. And our family had signed up with the Little Tokyo group. So the Little Tokyo group was assigned to go to Santa Anita. I lived in the Hollywood area, and the Hollywood area folks went to Pomona. So we
Yeah.
separated. But in Santa Anita, I have just really good memories of Santa Anita. I think for us children at 10 years old, my brother was a junior in high school, so he was active in all the sports that they had. They, my brother showed me a map. Well, he drew it himself. They had 3 softball diamonds. They had 1 baseball field. They had 3 basketball courts. They even had a sumo ring, and they even had a boxing club ring, and also even a box. One of the horse stables was converted into a boxing club near the grandstand. So I think the kids, the boys, and especially and the girls, hung out at this racetrack. It's called the Little Chiquita, which is now Arcadia Shopping Mall. But it's a wide area where all the kids went to play. We did have school, not formal classes, but we had a 4th grade area, a 5th grade area in the grandstand where they encouraged us to read and things like that. But the one thing I remember, I think we still felt American because when it was the 4th of July in camp in Santa Anita, we had Anita Fanita, a celebration celebrating the 4th of July. And when you think back of it right now, it seems weird that we still celebrated like Americans, but we didn't feel any different. We felt like Americans. So they had a dance. It was attended by thousands of people, and they had a boxing match where it says they had about I don't know if it's 500 or 5,000 people. They had a sumo match. They built a sumo ring in the grandstand area, and they had games and celebration for all of us kids. So it was a really fun day. And it seems when I gave a tour once to some Caucasian people from my LA Breakfast Club, they pointed out to me how strange that was that we still celebrated the 4th of July in a camp where we're imprisoned, but we didn't feel any different. So for the kids, I think like our age, it was all and I don't know where the reputation came that the Rover, the people from Santa Anita were the Yogures, but Yogure in those days it meant low life. So the Japanese people from Little Tokyo and Southern California were considered low life, and the people from the nice farming areas up north, like Lodi and Stockton, were called the farmers. And it had this little bit of rivalry between the farmers and the lowlifes, I guess. And my brother was a member of the lowlife, Pachuco. He had all the Pachuco clothing and like the Mexicans had here in Los Angeles. So and I remember, I remember Mintonai saying when he got to Santa Anita, he had never seen so many pretty young Japanese girls in his life. And he's because he came from a small family, I forgot from where, but he says for a boy of 13 to see so many pretty Japanese girls to him was like he had died and gone to heaven. We and you know, like I said, people were having signs that said, you know, Seabiscuit slipped here, Jesus Christ was born here, and you know, things like that. I don't know. I think there's a strange sense of humor that we all had, and I think that carried us through. And oh, my mother was going to an English class. She had to memorize the 13 colonies that started the United States, but it was all written in Japanese, and they sang it. I found out later from a professor from University of Tokyo that the song that they sang it to was a Japanese children's lullaby. And but you know, they're saying things like New Hampshire and you know all these states that formed the 13 colonies and singing it to a Japanese song. And I still have that paper where all the names of the 13 colonies. I can't read it because I can't read Japanese. But the professor that came to interview me, he could read all the um, 13 colonies. And he's the one that explained to me that it was 13 colonies that was sung to a Japanese young children's lullaby. So I don't know why they were, oh, I know the Japanese language schools were all being outlawed. We couldn't, they didn't want to teach us any Japanese language, so we were all happy, you know. But I think they tried to also teach the essays about American history. They couldn't apply for citizenship yet.
Right.
Somehow they were in this, my mother was in this class learning about American history. And I found that, I know she came home one day, she said, my lips are turning purple because we have to see B, and she's not used to seeing B with her teeth hanging over her lip. And she said, it's getting, my lips are turning purple now, you know. But those are the funny things that I still remember. And of course, you know, my story is just one story, and there were so many painful stories. So I don't mean to discount them, but even my girlfriend had a birthday party, and it was in the, oh, I know, front page of the Pacemaker. Her name was Helen Taniguchi. She had a birthday party. And it's remarkable to me how quickly that people organized a government within Santa Anita, where you had district managers, you had representatives, we had street names named after different horses. Seabiscuit and Man of War were our main two streets that crossed each other, but there was Whirlaway, and we learned a lot of names of horses then too. So it seems really strange when I look back at it now, how the coping that the way that the older Niseis made it so that we kids would have a good, normal, happy life, even as we are incarcerated. We didn't feel we didn't, there were certain, my sister got scared off by touching the fence, and because a soldier came down and came out of his tower and pointed a gun at the girls, 3 girls, and said, "Get away from the fence." She says they dropped their rocks and they ran as fast as they could away. She was a waitress at the White Mess Hall, and that's where she met her future husband. He was a timekeeper, and she was late coming to work every day, so he took notice of her, and they ended up going to dances at Santa Anita. He went to Amachi, she went to Roar. They met each other again up in Detroit, Michigan, got married and raised their family in Michigan. So there were good things that happened in camp. So for me, when I see now my family, I can't say that I regret one day in camp or
Yeah, well, as you can see, you can understand now why we turned to June for more information about the Assembly Center. She's an incredible memory of specific things that happened there. One of the things that I have found in talking to former detainees who were June's age is that yes, camp was fun. And I I had a hard time accepting that at first, but after hearing it from so many people and
Mhm.
realizing that young people did have a different experience as young
Mhm.
people, that I've really come to accept it. And I think that their stories are really important to hear. That's why I'm so glad there are people like June who are around to tell them. I know when we showed it at JANM, we did a presentation at JANM. There were several other former detainees there, and they all agreed that camp could be fun. So I'm really grateful to June for adding that perspective. The one thing that I always try to capture though, whenever I do a film, is sort of getting to um, maybe a little of the dark side. And I think if you see the whole film, The Misadventures of Anise Wee Queen, I think you'll see a little bit of that as well as June's wonderful take on her whole experience at Santa Anita. So, oh, she's raising her hand.
one of the sad things about Santa Anita now is that they have to tear down these old
Right.
stables within 7 years and build a whole new stable area. So they want to donate one of the stables to the museum or whoever will take one because they say they're not in the museum business, and they would like to preserve any one of the stables that any one of us lived in.
I think that's I would like to address the issue of the stables just because Brian, maybe you could address a little of the sort of misconception about stables being at every camp. Talk a little bit about why some camps had horse stalls and others didn't, um, and maybe a little bit of the confusion around that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, primarily the stables were at Tanforan and Santa Anita. Um, I should have done my homework before. There was one other camp where there was a significant number. I forget which one it is now. And then a couple others where it's unclear but possible that they were used. But for most of them, they didn't use horse stalls, as far as I can tell. Looking at contemporaneous records, maps, accounts from the time. But I think because Santa Anita and Tanforan, which is LA and San Francisco people, is so their accounts are so prominent. It's featured in, the classic Citizen 13660 by Mineo Kubo. Yoshiko Uchida writes about the horse stalls. So I think that that's become part of the Assembly Center story. So I think. I think there's a common misconception that, all or many or, almost all of the assembly centers had horse stalls. And it was really primarily Santa Anita and Tanforan with a little with some at a couple other camps, which I wish I would have bothered to look up before this. If you look at the Densho, you know, the articles in the encyclopedia, it'll have that information. But the interesting thing is there are a lot of oral histories and you know retrospective memories about you know us being in horse stalls at camps that I'm almost sure did not have them. Just as you know, I just wrote about this. People who remember entering WRA camps and seeing the barbed wire when the fences weren't up yet. We know the fences were built later. But you know, that's just, I mean, that happens after 80 years, right? So I think when you look at oral history accounts, you just have to, you know, verify and balance with contemporaneous accounts as well. And that doesn't make them invalid. It just makes it gives you further insight into how important those things are to people that they have those memories, right? Even if they're not literally true, that's still, you know, that's such a big part of that experience and such a salient part of the collective group experience.
I think one of the
Oh,
confusions is
yeah.
that there are horse stalls at some of the fairground sites.
Yes. Right.
And so the stalls were there. People may or may not have lived in them, and that the fact that there were horse stalls at these sites sort of gives people the thought that there were actual people living in them. You know, I kind of would like to open up the discussion. I don't know how many of you in the audience, our wonderful little audience, have any questions about any of the assembly centers. I'd be curious to know how many of you know much about them. Is there anybody who might have any comments that might be pertinent? And you get to ask this wonderful panel any questions about what perhaps are there people here who had maybe just tell us about your family's assembly center experience. Anybody want to? Okay, I see that there's not an overwhelming because it's such a, oh, here we go, Sachiko, Iwabuchi, sorry, I gotta pronounce my Japanese names. Um, so Sachiko says she's currently working at the San Francisco Public Library and doesn't have any questions yet, but wanted to contact the site organizer to use it at the library program. We're definitely open to sharing our site with whoever wants to use it. In fact, this program that we're doing on Tadaima, I'm hoping that we do live programs everywhere. So if there's an opportunity in your area for us to go and speak and give a little more information about the site, we'd love to do that. So thank you very much for asking that, and we can comply. If you fill out the content page, the resource page at the end of each site, there's a subscribe page, and it's a place where you can ask questions as well. So please, ask me those kinds of questions, and we'll definitely try to answer them and be in touch personally. So that contact um, pages, I mean that subscribe page is exactly for those kinds of issues, and we'd love to hear from you. So I would, anybody else have any comments, questions? Okay, so June has been raising her hand. Let's,
I think I got a new job now. I've been taking a lot of groups through Santa Anita for a tour. So if you're interested, you have to make the arrangements with Peter Siberol, Santa Anita. If there's no horses on site, or it's not a racing day, I'd be happy to give a tour.
Yeah.
Great. I have a question for Stan, and well, maybe Stan, here's a question for you. Now, because we visited all 16 of these sites, I'm wondering what site had the biggest impression on you and why? Like what made one site stand out, and what about it was particularly moving or interesting or whatever about it?
I'm not sure if any particular site. I remember I had never been to an assembly center site before we started the project, so everything was new to me. I think like a lot of the incarceration sites, just the sheer how large each of these sites were, the fairgrounds or the racetracks that we visited, you kind of saw how huge these places were, and obviously the army and the government were looking for places that they could that thousands of people can be held in detained basically so in a short period of time, and so they picked these places like fairgrounds, which already had fences around them, already had ways to control people. I mean, they were controlling animals, and now they want to control people. So I think that struck me as, I think, just a sheer, and also the you kind of multiply that by 16, and I know a lot of the places were relatively small, but just sort of the sheer size of the program itself, if you could call it a program, just to detain upwards of I mean, upwards of 100,000 people at the time in these different areas, and I think uh, I think a lot of the I think when Sharon, when you were finding the aerial photos, the historical aerial photos of the centers when they were in operation, you kind of saw how vast they were. Where there'd be rows and rows of barracks on the infield of a track, and you think how big a horse track is, and then it's just wall to wall barracks with it's at some of these sites, and then we would go and actually see the site, and you realize how big the the area is, but also how many people were detained there and forced to live there.
Yeah, I have to admit that I wasn't too keen on visiting all the sites until, um, because many of them don't exist anymore. So they're like, the area that the assembly center once was like a residential section or a
Right.
shopping center. So I didn't think we'd seen much, but I was pleasantly surprised because the whole experience of going to an actual site is really dramatic.
Right.
I encourage everyone to do it if they're in an area where there was once an assembly center, because you get a sense of the hugeness of it, and they
Mhm.
are in remote locations in most cases. So, and the wonderful experience we had is we got to talk to people who were involved in the memorialization of them, which is a whole nother story. I mean, people in the area got together to put up these really rather extensive memorials. And
Yeah, the memorials, I think, struck me as being very moving. I thought for a lot of them, because the survivors from the centers got together, raised money, and often raised a lot of money to put a lot of some of these memorials together, and they're extremely creative in the way that they get across the message of what this detention site was like, and what it meant to the people there. And I think so. I think that's pretty. To me, that was really interesting. And I think, as Sharon was saying, some of the sites, there's no evidence of anything left there. The Tan Foran is now a shopping center, so there's not much to take pictures there. But then you kind of realize what was actually there. I think Sacramento, it's basically a neighborhood now, so there's nothing remains there, but you can actually physically you could walk through the streets where this site was and get a kind of general idea of where things were and where people were.
I think it's important to point out that there are only two sites that do not have memorials. Well, there are several sites like Santa Anita that only have a plaque.
Mm, right.
So that, I guess, I don't know if that would be considered a memorial, but the ones that are the one site that Brian mentioned at Tulare, I always get Tulare and Turlock confused, but Tulare does not have anything to mark it, but a group of high school students got together with their teacher to insist that the fairgrounds, which where the Assembly Center once was, create a monument. So they're working heavily, I mean, hard to try to make that happen. And it's a great story because these high school students have no personal relationship to the Assembly Center. They just know that it was important. And the other place is Meyer, which again was so small that it's totally understandable. But when you think about all of these sites, finding people to get together to put up a huge, well, huge, I guess is kind of exaggerating, but big memorials, it's rather impressive. And we've joked about having in fact, Kimiko, I think we talked to you about, because you can reach them all up the ones in California, you could probably drive to each one in a day.
Mhm.
Half, because they're all along the five. So, we joked about doing a pilgrimage, but Brian insists on doing it in the heat of summer, which I've totally just
The assembly centers were open basically during the summer, so to get the experience, you need to do that, I'd say. So, and then I do want to add, I looked up, Tulare was the other assembly center that had significant numbers of horse stables that were used to house people, about a quarter of the population. And then Portland did not have literal horse stables, but was built on the site of a livestock pavilion. So you had some of the horse stall experience there. And then there was a section at Puyallup that was similar, under the grandstand section. Um, the organizers of the memorial say that there were horse stalls there. I'm not convinced of that, but I think certainly the horse stall experience applied to that area of Puyallup as well. And then there are others where I'm not sure about, but I haven't found any contemporaneous evidence that suggests that horse stalls were used at the other sites. But, you know, there's still research to be done on this.
You mentioned Portland, and in the question I asked Dan about which was the most memorable, I would say for me it was Portland because it's people were housed in these two huge buildings
Mhm.
with curtains surrounding each residence, and it was all on top of
Yeah,
a livestock
right.
facility that was reeked of livestock. So it was in a lot of ways worse than the horse stalls, if you can imagine, June, because you were in one big building with a curtain separating the individual units. And they said that, I mean, we heard accounts that there were so many flies that it would darken the light bulb. They fly all around. I mean, stories like that are really
And,
horrible.
and then it was also indoors, so you had really the heat was really during the hot part of the summer. The heat was really intense because it was indoors. So yeah,
Yeah, and if you're
arguably, it's hard to say because conditions were bad at a lot of places, but it's hard to top Portland.
Yeah, and the interesting thing also is that it's this giant expo facility today, so it's the
Yeah.
center of community activity. They'd have, Cirque du Soleil there. I mean, it's those buildings still exist, although I don't think they're used extensively, but they are on the site, so you can actually go in and see the space in which the people were housed. So it's really fascinating. And I really encourage people to at least inquire about if you're in the area to go visit some of these places because they're really amazing. Um, so I guess we're pretty close to the end of our time. Um, and so I would like to again thank Kimiko. And, I mean, I'm just so grateful that we had this time to share our site with you. I hope it encourages some of you to, subscribe and let us know what you think. Um, June, thank you, thank you. You were a total last minute. She was busy this morning, but she got home in time to join us. I really appreciate it. And of course, Brian, I count on for anything that if I ever have a question about anything, I ask Brian. And of course, Stan, again, my colleague, photographer extraordinaire. We couldn't have done this without him because his photographs really capture the sites as they were today. So with that, I guess we'll close. And again, thanks. Hopefully there's one more Tadaima program you guys have a chance to tune into. I may try to do that. And thank you all for participating with us. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
All right, thanks.